Representative Tokuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to build upon the comments of my colleagues. I, too, greatly value our defense partnership with Australia, and I've been working in my role on the Armed Services Committee to expedite the construction of infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific. I represent Hawaii, that both of our nations will be relying on. And our partnership, along with the United Kingdom and Aukus, is important for all three nations and the broader security of the Indo-Pacific. Last week, I included an amendment in the National Defense Authorization Act directing the Defense Department to explore ways to expand the AUKUS partnership that address our critical mineral supply challenges, including as it relates to rare earth minerals. Prime Minister, given Australia's historic strengths at mining and mineral processing, what are your thoughts to potentially expanding AUKUS to also include approaches to reducing our reliance on China and other countries when it comes to critical minerals, especially for defense purposes? And Ambassador, you spoke about making sure that we are countries of like-minded union. In particular, I'm thinking about the Quad. Last week, this committee convened a roundtable to talk about our vulnerabilities in pharmaceuticals, API, KSM, reagents, and solvents and such. And as we know, China has quite the market in this particular area. Thoughts about making sure that when we look at the Quad and the work that it's doing there, it also looks at particular areas where we do need to decouple and make ourselves less vulnerable, in particular with the pharmaceutical industries. I'm also wondering, for both of these areas, rare minerals as well as pharmaceuticals and other areas of dependency, is the current tariff policies that we're seeing from the Trump administration, quite frankly, playing into China's hands? We need to be very smart and deliberate about all actions and how it all connects together. So I would love to hear that. And if we have some time, Ambassador, you mentioned the fact that we need to know the baseline. China took 15 years to get to this point where they had us by the batteries and the meds. What else do we need to be forward looking at in terms of where they are building up a potential vulnerability and dependency for us and our allies going forward into the future?
I might just deal with the AUKUS question first. It's very important AUKUS retains its focus. It is a defence partnership agreement, both to ensure that Australia can have a capability of nuclear-powered submarines, which can play an important role in the network of alliances in the Indo-Pacific and be part of that deterrent effect. And that is, for Australia, an enormous undertaking to do this. And it requires our full focus on those tasks. Pillar 2 of AUKUS focuses on ensuring we have advanced defence technologies, which enables us to also strike that deterrent against, in particular, the PRC, but other potential adversaries globally. Again, keeping the focus on that. A key part of when we did AUKUS was ensuring that we had an integrated defence industrial base across those three jurisdictions. Paring back the regulations, be it on export controls or ITARs or things like that, and I think there's been enormous progress made on that. More to do, but I am deeply thankful to the US Congress for the work they've done in paring that back. We've made more progress than we have in the last 50 years on those issues, and that's a positive thing. The reason I highlight that is that what you're raising is an important input into that defence industrial base. The processed rare earths that go into, whether they be nuclear-powered submarines or F-35s or whatever it happens to be, that is essential for those things to be done, and everything else that is going to be done that we haven't even dreamt of yet. What I would humbly suggest is I think the best forum for those industrial type processes is probably more through the Quad. I think it certainly supports AUKUS and I think is entirely consistent with what AUKUS is doing. I think what's important is that it gets done. And I think the Quad in particular provides a good vehicle because it includes Japan. More recently, there's a company in Australia, Pilbara Minerals, who have struck a joint venture with POSCO in Korea, which is a processing rare earths, lithium raw material arrangement. We need to see more and more of those types of deals and providing those supply chains amongst friends. It is in Australia's interests for the US industrial base to be strong, and I think this is a point that's sometimes lost about allies and partners. We think it's a good thing for the US to rebuild its industrial base. We have a stake in that, and we want to ensure that happens. That's why under AUKUS already we've paid $500 million in supporting nuclear submarine production here on Virginia class. I don't know of any other ally the United States has that is actually paying the United States to help build your defence industrial base on submarines. That's what a serious partner does that is keen on doing heavy lifting in a partnership. And so I would say a similar amount of effort and focus is required to get those supply chains on rare earths and critical metals right, because you cannot pursue the capabilities that you want under AUKUS unless you have those secure supply chains. So the issue you're focusing on is dead right.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I would, two things I would say and take a note, or three rather. One, take a page out of the export controls. When I was ambassador, we worked on that. The United States position vis-a-vis semiconductors with China was strengthened because Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Dutch stood shoulder to shoulder with us. That's why China squealed like a stuck pig. And that's a lot for a Jewish kid to say, stuck pig, okay? And so you gotta, that was a joke, you guys gotta relax around here. So you have to appreciate that is an example. China sued for peace because the effectiveness of our coalition worked to isolate the isolator. The Quad is a place of economic cooperation. You gotta look at the strategic landscape. I said this earlier to a colleague's question. They are competing with us on AI dominance around the world, not just with our AI. Will the rules of AI be written around a China model or US-based model? Quantum computing, same deal. Biotech, same deal. So you look down 5, 6 promising technologies tomorrow that are going to be the most dominant technologies, and you begin to double down both on the research dollars that go to those technologies, the security of the companies and the innovation that comes out of those research dollars, and the protection of them in the early stages to be worldwide competitors. Now, I do want to say, because this probably is the last answer, so I might as well kind of go with it. Look, I think tariffs are a blunt instrument that are being applied bluntly. They should be used strategically, not across the board. Not all problems. It's a hammer in search of a nail. That's my view. I think that if we thought about this strategically, looked at tomorrow, where do we want to be? How do we invest in the technology? How do we invest in the brain power? How do we invest in the muscle power to build up a competitive economic ecosystem around areas? And the problem when you lose your industrial base is that there's a whole series of ecosystems that's part of that, because that industrial base is part of the innovation piece. It's not universities over here and production over here. That's why you can't concede the ground of industrialization or manufacturing to China, because take a look at the EV auto industry. We were first, like solar, but take the EV, we were first with a national brand called Tesla. Their companies, though, figured out how to recharge them in 5 minutes. We haven't. They have an ecosystem that is operating. You need that manufacturing as a part and parcel and the heart and soul of your innovation. Mr. Chairman, can I close on one thing? I do want to thank both the chairman, the ranking member, and the full members of the committee for having a hearing on something essential to the economic prosperity and the future of not only our country, our allies, but most importantly, the communities and people we represent. And for a rare moment, as somebody who also participated in this sport, this is a rare committee of bipartisanship. We'll have our differences on a number of other issues, but you came together on looking to the future and how to make you play a constructive role in shaping it. And I want to thank both of you and the members for a real thorough discussion about what tomorrow can bring and how to make sure it's to America's advantage and our allies' advantage.